All right, welcome to the latest episode of the Coleman Power Organic Fitness Podcast. I have my latest guest here in front of me, James Foley. All right, all the way from Ballyduff, not Ballyduff Lower. He made sure that I had that correct before he came onto the show. Ballyduff Upper, that is in the likes of West Waterford. All right, James, say hello to the listeners.
All right, thanks very much for inviting me on, Coleman. Yeah, I'm from the extreme west of County Waterford. The next fields are County Cork, so I'm just in the right side of it. So yeah, same side as
Blue,
yourself.
yeah, a blue and white man for sure.
Blue and white,
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, blue and white. You cut us, we bleed blue, as they say.
exactly. Yeah,
So
never
I
never
brought James
change.
on to, I suppose, being someone who's in conversion. We can talk a little bit more about that, from the likes of conventional to the likes of organic dairy producer. James, tell me, I suppose, a little bit about who you are, what you're currently doing, and maybe your future plans for the likes of the farm.
Yeah, I'm a dairy farmer. Mostly dairy, I suppose. We're trying to diversify a little bit, but we're milking cows here, milking nearly 200 cows here, and we kind of went into organic conversion, I suppose, 18 months ago, almost at this stage. But we were kind of on that track for a while. Um, we were kind of getting fed up of paying a lot of money for nitrogen, and we could see that there was farmers in other parts of the world doing pasture-based dairy, whatever, and they were doing it without nitrogen or less nitrogen. Kind of just started going down that road and kind of researching it and what have you. And we started growing our crops without nitrogen. What we did was we introduced mixed species swards, which would be kind of basically kind of a more of a natural setup, really. But whereas in normal conventional dairying at the moment in Ireland, there would be one species of grass, and that's it, and that needs a lot of fertilizer. So it's a mixture of herbs and legumes and grasses, and so we started introducing those things around 2018 mark. But we had been researching for a while before that, but we started kind of feeling our way into it, and so then in 2022 we eventually said, like, no, enough is enough. We're kind of we had stopped all nitrogen on the farm, and we said, right, we might, some of the other chemicals that might be useful from time to time, we just said, right, okay, we might have to do without those now. But we were kind of doing without most of them anyway, so we kind of figured we were going that way anyway. But it was strictly a cost issue, really, but we've seen biodiversity kind of increase on the farm. There's more butterflies, bees, and these kind of things as well. And it's a nicer environment to work in, but it's it doesn't pay the bills as such. But what pays the bills is the less inputs, and and
Expensive.
look, I mean, we'd be hoping that, I suppose, that the food is better as well, without the chemicals. And so the mixed species swords, like there's herbs in it and whatever. It's like yourself, if you had a plate of dinner and you had porridge for dinner, and you'd porridge for breakfast, and you'd porridge for your evening meal. You'd be kind of getting sick of it at times. So it's better for the cows too. So there's a better kind of a mixture there.
And I was literally
Um,
just going to ask you that, James. I have written down here
yeah.
as we're having this conversation. I said, could you just tell us and everyone else, the listeners inclusive, of what are the benefits of the like just mixed swords, and tell people what
Yeah.
mix would be in it and why it's beneficial towards the animals, and
Yeah.
then we gain advantage. Yeah.
Like, there's a few different things. It's from the farming point of view, and it's from the nutritional point of view for the cows as well. And I suppose hopefully goes into the milk as well. But we say there's a variety of grasses to start off with, and some of them are deeper rooting, and some of them are better able for droughts and cold weather in the spring. And so you have more of an even supply throughout the year. But the legumes would fix nitrogen, and they'd be very good protein in them for the cows as well. And the herbs would be usually high in minerals, and some of them have uh, kind of anti-worming, you know, uh, kind of
Right.
effects, and those types of things, parasites. And but the high minerals is usually the case. They're usually higher in minerals than normal grasses as such. They'd be kind of, broadleaf, any kind of a broadleaf plant, really. As long as they eat it, the weeds are a thing, I suppose, in general. But if the animal eats it, it's not a weed anymore. So, but we're finding that when you put in these mixture things, you don't tend to have as much unwanted plants. because they tend to compete against what would be the weeds like docks and these kind of things. But the herbs we're using predominantly would be chicory, plantain, and like you would definitely see plantain on the side of the road. It's a plant growing everywhere really, but and dandelions, these kind of things are in these mixes, and so they generally tend to be quite good for milk production, and but like the overall health of the animal, because they got a more varied diet, they've more better fiber profile, and and minerals and protein, whatever, and things that kind of tend to be more balanced. And and like we do see the benefits in the milk. They do tend to have as much milk, or if not more, than before, and the cost issue is like I said, it's said before, it's the biggest issue really. It's the fact that we're saving money on this, and but like we're kind of excited as to what what this milk, if we ever test it or whatever, or what the profile of it for ourselves, I suppose, and for the consumer, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's even more, I suppose, reiterating. The fact is that it's saving you money and it's given comparable yields, if not more, than you currently had before. And that's one of the simple things that you're really seeing yourself firsthand.
Yeah, and like look, I mean, I said it to you off air. When I'm talking to other farmers, that's what I talk about, because that's the bottom line,
Money.
and like we say, if you, I mean, look, there's no point in saying otherwise. If you look out at the field of these things, if you're used to a lawn type situation, it's going to be a bit different. It's going to be looking a bit scraggier and whatever, up and down. Some of the plants are taller than other ones, and it won't look as tidy as such, but you'll get over it pretty quickly when you realize you're saving money. So, but it's a case of appreciating it as well, because I suppose there is an obsession with tidiness in farming, and a lot of things you see people cutting their hedgerows down very severely at times as well. And even the last couple of years we've been leaving them grow a bit longer, and you see benefits for there's a lot more berries on the hedgerows now, and they're a lot thicker, and they're kind of good for shelter as well. So it's not all that we'll say it's a job to cut these hedges or whatever. It actually has a benefit for the animals as well, because it slows down the wind speed, and now it's something we have to do more of, is grow more trees around the place. But you see, definitely this year I see huge pile of berries, and I can see other farms that are still cutting the hedges like the way they were, and it's bare, because it needs a couple of years growth before berries and these things that come on the edges. But just you see, we just have to cope with we have to cope with these other plants and hedgerows and these things differently, because we don't have the chemicals to spray them as we used to before. And there are a few issues with electric fence wires and that kind of stuff. You have to kind of do more manual cutting as well time to time, but in general we're kind of happy enough as we're going so far anyway.
Yeah, that's good. I suppose just that you're, I suppose, in conversion to the likes of organic, what are you using for the likes of application of fertilizer to the field, if any, that you're currently going to use for the next year or
Yeah,
the future?
with organic you have to have some like dry bedding for the cows rather than the normal cubicle system. Now we do have some cubicles as well, but we would bed the cows in straw for a lot of the time. Now I know it's not actually practical for every farmer in Ireland to have straw, because there would be enough straw in the whole country for that. But there is a requirement in organic that would be one of the sticking points for some people, that there would be the requirement for some bedding, but that bedding then can be used as a fertilizer as well. So and it's quite a good fertilizer as well. It's you can make it into kind of nice compost or whatever, and spread it back on the land. And we'd have some liquid slurry as well, which would be kind of a lot from our milking parlour, and washing down and what have you, and where the cows are walking in and out every day in the concrete. And but on our feed passageway as well from the winter time, we'd have slurry as well. So we tend to kind of try to be more thoughtful about where we put it and when around the year, so that the plants are kind of getting the slurry at the time when they need it. And I mean, look, there's a lot to be learned from that point of view. But as would say with conventional farmers at the moment, a lot of them don't have enough tank storage, and some of the slurry has been put out a little bit early in the spring, and you know, it can have the danger is that it might run off a little bit, and we don't want farmers getting in trouble over stuff ending up in our waterways. But that these things are happening, and I mean, I'm sure it's happened here as well. But we're trying to get to a stage where we have more capacity to be able to put it out at the time of the year when it's going to benefit the land the most. So it's just something we have to be more thoughtful about, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose
But
with a lot of
anything
people,
else from outside, nothing else from outside does. Yeah.
yeah,
Other than that.
all natural inputs that are created on the farm are then reused on the likes of the land that you are farming. Right? It's a great point. So also as well, I suppose a lot of people might have negative effects to the likes of farming. And maybe I'd love you to expand on why is the reason do you think that there's lesser population of young individuals, whether it be male or female, taking on the farming role?
Yeah, I think the current system tends to be a very high debt situation for, let's say if you go to agriculture college now and just say you get into cows or something like that and you had the cows before, there's a huge investment to get sheds and milking parlours and all those sort of things. It's very hard to people to get in at that level. But look, the way I see it, there's a lot of opportunities there, but they're just not being kind of recognized by young farmers, I think. And I think a lot of it, it would say if we're trying to sell to a commodity market, then that's a kind of a fool's game anyway. And I know we have been all the time over the years, but we're trying to get to a stage where we're connecting a little bit closer with local people, and because Ireland is actually a very good market, um, but we're selling our stuff overseas, and just whoever will buy it. And I know, look, a lot of it's going to England, I suppose, but outside of that, I mean, it could be shipped anywhere in the world, really. And they're not coming over here just because it's Green Island or whatever. They're just it's on price. So if you're competing against the lowest cost anywhere in the world where you've got lower labor and everything else, it's very hard. So um, I think we should be concentrating on our more local markets or whatever. And like you do see people, you do see farmers on very small scale able to make a living, but obviously they have to be quite efficient. And but I do I think some of these folks are not really getting enough attention, I suppose, because you know the idea is there that you need hundreds and hundreds of acres to be able to have a viable farm. And I don't really think that's the case. Now, I mean, I'm saying that from the point of view we have about 300 acres ourselves, but you get to a stage where one person can't manage much more than that anyway. So as I'm not saying I'm a one person operation. My wife and my parents are still involved. My wife Clodagh, and we're all kind of on the farm as such. But like if you're trying to be a one person operation on a farm, 100 acres, 150 acres would be more than enough work for that. So to think that you need a whole pile of land, I mean, I think it's kind of a bit of a kind of a rat race or something. But there's definitely opportunities there, and in Ireland is such, like, I mean, I know there's quite a lot of milk being exported, but there's a lot of opportunities, I would imagine, in growing the things that we can grow in Ireland that we're currently importing. Now look, supermarkets are a problem. I think it's very hard to compete against the prices that they have, but I think there is a kind of a clamoring for people to buy more local food. It's just a case of getting it to them. It's very hard to, if you're trying to deliver food around the place, you'd spend half the day going around the place dropping bits and pieces all over. So it needs to be kind of efficient, or maybe even small co-ops or something that can work
Yeah,
together
and,
and
and you're
get
dead
things
right
going.
you're dead right in mentioning that the whole idea of this podcast in general is to emphasize the fact that more and more people should be buying local, should be buying organic or chemical free, or from someone that they know and trust. And someone mentioned on the likes of the podcast very recently, try and shake the hand that feeds you. That's a very powerful, literally, point
Yeah.
to mention, right? If you can get as close as you can to the food that's being produced, whether it's the milk that you're drinking, whether it's the eggs that you're consuming for breakfast or scrambled egg later in the evening, or it's literally the potatoes that you are then consuming for one of your main meals of the day, that's going to not only benefit you, it's beneficial for the environment. Air miles is a huge thing that we don't even discuss, whether it's something that we buy, food or otherwise, being shipped into this country.
Yeah, and and like double wrapping in plastic inside in shops, and like vegetables coming from Spain, and how many days it's on the road before it gets here, and we open up the bag, and it doesn't. How long is it going to last? I mean, if you got it out of your garden, it would probably last a week, no problem. Or if you got it close by, and so yeah, I completely agree with what your previous speakers were saying there. But it is very difficult to actually get it, and I know, like, would say we're in the milk game, right? So if and I know there's people looking for raw milk and looking for different products, but there's a lot of regulations there as well, so it's kind of difficult for the likes of us to actually get started. Now we will hope we're hoping to go that way, but you know, there's testing just to make food safety regulations and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the time they're set up for large multinationals, where like they have such volume and they would have the same amount of testing to do as a small farm would have to do. And the costs that go with that are quite high, and like I was talking to a raw milk producer the other day, and the testing is something like about €2,000 a year, whether they sell 10 or 15 liters a week or 50,000 liters a day. That's the testing, that's the cost of it. So it's very hard to, and there is obviously a clamoring for other products as well, but the regulations are the regulations are one thing, but to actually know what the actual regulations are is actually quite another thing as well, and it's not something that's being taught enough of in agricultural colleges, and I'd say almost non-existent. So that's something that we like to connect to shake the hand of the person that grows the food or whatever. It's hard sometimes for them to actually give it to you. You could give it to them, but you could actually probably give it away to them, but to actually get paid for it is probably illegal, depending on what it is. But it's just one of these things that I suppose over time I think could be challenged a lot. If you go out to places like France where they make cheese and they're the best cheesemakers in the world and the best at a lot of food in the world, and some of the things they can do over there, even though they have the same rules as they have here, they tend to be kind of more sympathetic to the rules. The local officials, they don't be taking every single letter to the law, or the most extreme interpretation of it or whatever. So I think there's scope there because not everything is a rule. A lot of things are guidelines, and the guidelines, they're not necessarily the law. So I think there's a lot can be a lot. If a few heads knocked together, could probably figure some of these things out. But and I don't know do politicians really realize it, or whether they're in a position to do a lot about it. It's kind of difficult to change rules like that, but it's something that does have to be looked at, I think, to kind of make things a little bit more easy to set up and not have a huge cost of setting up a business, because a lot of time you don't know what the actual demand is going to be, even if you're going to be trying to you could test the market. We'll just say if we made a little bit of butter here on the farm, could test the market and see how it goes. But no matter what, you're not going to know until people actually try it out, and whether it'll keep coming back to you before you start. So you could have all your plans in the world, and you could have loads of thousands of euros spent on borrowing and everything else to try and get started, and the next thing you realize that, oh, there's another person over the road doing that, or whatever it is, and you can't make any money on it. So it's just, I suppose, some of these things, like, they have to grow organically. So to get started, that's where I see the biggest issue.
Yeah, and that's a fair point too. I know we mentioned a lot about local and things. Is that something that you're planning on doing in the future, or where is your current product of milk going to?
Yeah, we're selling our milk to our Arabon Co-op. They're based in Nina, and they just take the tank of milk away every 3 days or whatever. And they did have a liquid milk brand, and they've kind of gone out of that. They're into more. They make some butter and they make some powder, and they sell it off, and that's kind of mainly what they do. But you know, uh, I suppose on the smaller scale, it's for us, it would basically, there wouldn't be too many options on a small scale for us to sell our milk to. And as we're going organic, there is a couple of options for us. We as to who we can sell our milk to, that will pay us an organic price, which it's normally a bit higher than the conventional price, but it's something that needs a little bit of development as well, because at the moment there's actually only 70 or so, maybe possibly up to 80 organic dairy farmers out of something like 16,000, so the market isn't being really developed. So at the moment, we'll say, if you're talking on a slightly larger scale than local, if Germany or someone wants some organic Irish dairy, they will want it by the lorry load. And at the moment, it would be possible with the amount of suppliers that are there. So you wouldn't get on a shelf unless it's been able to be stocked year round. So in order to get to that scale, you need, something needs to move. So at the moment, the amount of dairy farms that are there are small, and there is quite good premiums to get into organic dairying, but the market is kind of not really ready for it yet. It's not that there isn't demand for organic; it's that we have to be able to supply it as well, to meet the demand. And it's just a tricky size of at the moment. Like, if there was a few hundred farmers, it would actually be quite a lot easier to.
And James, why do you think that there's a supposed reluctancy for people to, I'm going to say, go into producing organic milk or anything for that matter, as opposed to staying conventional? Why do you think there's kind of a friction?
I think, yeah, I mean, there was good reason why people, mostly for saving work. Just say if you're using herbicides and you're growing some kind of vegetables. The hand weeding was a major problem. So it's easy to understand why they started using these chemicals. But, so it was a labor saving thing, I suppose, originally. But I suppose things have moved on a bit. So there is ways around it. It's not like we have to go back to the 1950s. There is, there's mechanical weeding. There's different things that can be actually done organically. If you were going into having some kind of a crop like that. But on like I mentioned weeds before, that's a problem as well, that people can't tolerate. Farmers can't tolerate certain types of weeds, but it's been drummed into them over the years. And myself, I mean, I still find it difficult to look at nettles and docks and thistles and stuff in fields. So, the temptation is there to, it's not that I'm kind of over the spraying him, but the temptation is there to go out with a mower and cut them down, But, they actually all have a benefit to the soil as well. So, when you actually dive into it, actually a lot of these weeds are actually repairing your soil. So, but I think there is a large mindset change needed to actually get there to be able to be an organic producer, because I suppose it's kind of like a crutch, a little bit. I know a lot of dairy farmers, a lot of farmers in general think that you have to put out nitrogen to grow grass. Now, I was talking to a guy there recently, and he said, like, he has to cut his lawn every week, and I said, like, I said, how did it ever happen that people think you actually need to be putting nitrogen every week? So you can't even stop grass from growing, So when you get to that stage, like, but there is this idea that your yield is going to drop dramatically, and it's actually true if you stop nitrogen just of a shot. So, but it's not something. The awareness isn't there. You have to do a lot of digging. You have to do a lot of your own research to kind of understand how to do this. And I suppose like, and there's farmers like myself out there, but that will talk to other farmers. But the advisory services are kind of I would say a little bit behind the scene on the advice they're giving to get in. Well, I think a lot of them don't understand it either. They had the conventional training too, but yeah, look, I think it's mostly a mindset thing, really. It's a mindset, and like, I think seeing is believing as well. So if you know a farm that's doing this organically and is doing well and looks like the yields are good and what have you, I mean, it's hard to kind of, if you're showing figures on paper, it's one thing, but seeing it in real life is that's the only way to convince people, I think, you know.
And was it for yourself? Was it a farm walk that you could literally visited and ended up going, "This is the clicking point where I'm going to see it myself firsthand, and then switch over to the organic"? What was the point, I suppose, that you said this is now time for yourself, Clodagh, and family to switch over?
Yeah, I'd say, like, I actually don't know if there one light bulb moment or anything like that as such. As people have asked me that before, but yeah, over time, it just things started to click, and that, you know, it's not a case of having an ideology against using chemicals or whatever, but when you actually look into it really deeply, you see that a lot of these chemicals are actually harming soil biology and harming, it's not just that they're harming bees or anything else, but they're actually harming your productive ability on the farm. So if you're killing certain bacteria, certain, things that eat pests and what have you, you're actually working against yourself, and it's costing money. So I the realization, as I've kind of read more stuff and listened to podcasts of different experts in different fields or whatever, it kind of eventually got to the point where I could see, like, we'll say one simple example was this research is done in Ireland of in Lions Estate, and they're connected with UCD, and they put in a mixture of different plants versus the monoculture with the nitrogen, and they found comparable yields, and that was all the testing, the proper testing was done. It wasn't just an anecdotal case or whatever. And when you could see that it was done in Ireland, it kind of gives you a bit more confidence. But the more I looked into it, a lot of these trials have been done over 15, 20 years in places like Germany, and there's one particular experiment called the Jena experiment, this JENA experiment, and it's one. There's actually a very simple YouTube video, but there's hundreds of scientific papers on going from simple monocultures up to, I think, up to something like 60 species of plants, and they found that there was greater biomass in the more species you had, and that was very interesting to me. Is that there was kind of a synergy in the soil between all these plants. They're all helping each other out. There is this thing called the mycorrhizal network, of fungal network under the soil that helps extend the roots, and it just connects plants together. And it's kind of like a supermarket between, different plants need different minerals, and some plants are able to get them, and other ones are not so good at getting them, and they share them, and they share moisture and everything else. So the more we kind of got into all this, the more I realized that we might as well be organic now, and I know organic certification doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do everything right, but you're not using chemicals, and I suppose what I'd be looking in the future would be sort of a regenerative organic. So, like,
Yes.
regenerative would be just like you're trying to everything in your power to kind of increase your soil organic matter and increase the life on your farm. And there is a lot of studies out there that the more organic matter in your soil, the more productive the land is. And it's very hard to do that when you're using chemicals like Roundup and different things like that, because they kill soil biology. And look, they do have a place in occasional use or whatever maybe. But now, look, the more I learn about these things, the more I think that most chemicals can't be good for you. So if they weren't around in your grandparents or your great grandparents' time, they're probably not, they're probably not there long enough to actually know what they can do to people.
Yeah.
So that's kind
No,
of, look,
and that's great points you brought up, is the fact that you're learning and we're all still learning, including myself and other farmers as we go along. And it's what you've decided off your own back, and it's working for you. And that's why I literally wanted to bring you on here and literally just share your story about your family run business of you producing milk and keeping it most certainly as regenerative agriculture being your main focus going forward. James, would you let the listeners know where's the best place for them to get in contact with you and just keep up to date with anything that's going on the likes of the farm?
Yeah, we actually have a website on the farm. It's coolydoodyfarm.ie. And I assured you earlier on that Coolydoody is the name of the Townsland, and we didn't make that one up. But if you Google Coolydoody at all, you'll find coolydoodyfarm.ie. Now it's not always updated, but Clodagh has the Instagram account on her phone as well as Coolydoody Farm account, and I have my own Twitter account. It's everything Coolydoody. You'll find us if you Google it. You'll find my Twitter account. You'll find the Instagram accounts and everything else. But yeah, look, I suppose at the moment we're not selling anything directly to the public or whatever, but I suppose in time we will, and hopefully we'll we'll keep it updated on the social media and what have you, and yeah, so I suppose in the future hopefully we will have,
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to say, James, thanks so much. Such an informative podcast, you wouldn't believe it. And I always end these podcasts by saying, stay tuned, stay classy, and keep it organic.